Well, hello again, guys. This is Christian Bassar again after a long delayed episode of History Vice video blog. Tonight I'm going to be talking about something I'm actually studying for a Canadian history exam coming up in a few weeks. This topic is about New France, France's colony in Canada, and of course this is obviously before British takeover of it and of Canada, and this was obviously became New France became Quebec and everything. So I want to talk about two theories. There are two kind of schools of relating how was New France ruled, or how was it influenced? Was it influenced mostly by France, or did it kind of have its own identity? And so there are two schools there. So one theory, or one school, is frontier, or frontierism, I guess we could use that word, is basically New France had this idea is basically New France had its own methods of doing things. It adapted to its surroundings because there were surroundings and circumstances that were different from New France, or from France, the old country, sorry. And basically, frontierism says, okay, we're a colony of France, yes, but these are our own circumstances, and we're really not French. Or not French, but it's a completely different situation. One danger of that is that if we go too far in this view, then we kind of think that New France is kind of its own country almost. We forget that France actually had control. The other school is what's called Metropolis, or Metropolisism? I don't know. I don't think that's even a word, but let's just go with Metropolis, make it simple. So the Metropolis idea talks about how France controlled New France. It controlled its colony tightly, controlled everything, so basically New France is just basically France on another continent. It's not even really a colony anymore. It's not its own people, basically. But the problem is, if we go too far with that theory, then we kind of tell ourselves that New France really did not have anything of its own. It didn't offer anything of its own. It was all France's thing and whatever. So, like a lot of debates in history, you kind of need to consider both sides, and a lot of them both have merit. So in a way, it's kind of a mix. So they kind of come together like this. So basically, I believe that there is a good mixture of both. And because France did have, New France's people were adaptable, and as we'll talk about in a minute or two, but at the same time, there were laws and decisions made in France across the Atlantic Ocean that actually did affect the colony. So we'll first talk about some of those decisions, and some of these decisions were made by King Louis XIV in France. So Louis XIV, he took a vested interest in New France. Basically, New France was a colony that it was going good, but its future was kind of uncertain because their population was very low, for example. I believe their population at one point was 3,000, while at the same time, the colonies of their British rivals, which were pretty much right next door, had 70,000 people there. So there's more like the difference in population is like 14 times almost, somewhere around there. So it was really almost probably kind of scary for a lot of people if they were concerned about British security, and as they should have been, because there were incidents where the British took Acadia, and so on. So there was definitely concern there. So the King of France took initiatives to increase the population, and they're like the filles du roi, the daughters of the king. They were a bunch of women. I believe it was about 750. I believe they were sent to New France to kind of marry and increase the population of the colony. So that was one initiative, because before, New France wasn't really attractive to attract immigrants. Like, wages were low, and also, unlike Spain, the Spanish colonies, their wages were higher, and they had many more immigrants coming in. And also, there were cold winters. It was a harsh climate. It was still fairly small, and there were lots of stories about native Canadian enemies like the five tribe Iroquois, for example. And ooh, I should stop moving that out of habit. Okay, and also there were lots of dissidents were not allowed to go to New France either, so that was one less pool of population, if you will, that could come to New France. So the Fille du Roi was one effort at trying to increase the population of the colony. And also, New France did adopt had the seigneurialism system, or seigneur system. And seigneur is the French word for lord. So as you can kind of gather from that name, perhaps, that it was kind of almost a feudal system. In some ways, it was feudal. There were differences, though. It wasn't as oppressive as feudalism, because in feudalism, you had harsh things like, I'll give you this land, but you will have to fight for me, and basically the only right I can give you is to give you land. And so, while a seigneurial system, there was a bit more. It wasn't as harsh, and in fact, lords or owners of land were bound by contract to the workers by ratified agreement. So it wasn't just simply, oh, I'll give you land, and then basically you have no rights other than that. This was actually a contract, and of course, contracts are broken, of course. So that's part of this seigneurial system too. And really, the word for the seigneurial inhabitants is not really peasant. It's more habitant, so habitants. So the New France did have that system, and so it was also in France and in New France. But there were differences, though, because in New France there wasn't as much of a military emphasis. So again, it wasn't like, oh, the lord in New France is going to go and fight this war against another lord or another country, so the seigneurs, the habitants, should go and fight for them. There wasn't so much of that. And also, even though the seigneurial system in New France did kind of reinforce the class system in the colony, there wasn't. It was definitely not as strong in the colony either. And in fact, there were times where you didn't even necessarily have to be noble to actually own to be part of the seigneurial system. Sometimes it was royal favor instead of lineage and stuff, and heredity that actually gave you title and land on that seigneurship or that seigneurial system. So those are some differences, and also kind of culturally too. The New French, or the colonists, were very independent by nature. So, obviously being on the frontier, there are circumstances and that'll apply to the colony, but not to France. So they kind of had to adapt and everything like that. There were business deals with natives. There were all kinds of these factors that the French in Europe didn't have to worry about. And also, there were a bunch of laws, too, in European France that were set, like religious laws, for example. Europe had fought religious wars after the Reformation and so on, and they had things like Protestants had to take part in Roman Catholic rituals and practices, and they had religious tithes that people had to pay, so basically almost a church tax. And in New France, those rules were harder to enforce. And also, there was also kind of the attitude that people didn't want to enforce them as much, simply because there were, again, circumstances in the colony that were different from the mainland France. Like, they had to deal with colonial rivals, like the Dutch and the English had rival colonies in the area. There were also native enemies, again, the five tribe, or the Five Nations Iroquois. There were the Iroquois Confederacy. There were things like that. There were harsh winters. There was a harsh climate. So there was a bit of sympathy towards the colonists. It's basically, okay, these conditions are tougher than they are in New France in some ways, so we'll be a little more lenient. And actually, a very interesting thing is sometimes the economy was different too. New France did get money from France, but it wasn't enough. And at one point, so there wasn't a whole lot of a specie or anything to back any money up. So basically, what the colony did, they actually used playing cards as specie or money. So then basically, this it appears that that could be redeemed later. Unfortunately, this caused disadvantages because then the face value of that card was actually less than the face value of the money. By the end of the War of Spanish Succession, there was it wasn't as valuable. So so there you go. So you have certain things like in France. There, I don't know which hand to use. In France, there were decisions like the Fille du Roi and the seigneurial system, and also whatever laws were passed in France also applied to New France, of course. So there's part of the metropolis system. But then you have over here, you have the frontier where people were very independent. They created their own species system when they had no cash, basically. And so they adapted that way. They also learned from the natives survival skills, food, clothing, and all that kind of thing too. So, and obviously in France, that wasn't learned. So there's influences of the frontier idea. So blend them together, you get a good mix of what New France was like and the influences on it. So that is good for this edition of History Vice video blog. Hopefully I'll be able to record some more soon, but again, I'm going into assignments and exams, so hang in there. But it should get a little less busy over the summertime. See how work and stuff goes, but we shall see. Hope you guys have enjoyed this edition of History Vice, and hope you learned something. And it helps me review too, because I was just reading this in my notes. It's like, aha! I was kind of looking to do something the other day, but I couldn't really think of anything. So anyway, we will talk to you later, and see ya. Have a good time.